Hello class 9, good morning everyone. So students, let us complete the second part of the first chapter of computer, that is communication cycle. Alright, in the last class we studied about the communication, the features of effective communication, then importance of communication skills, impact of effective communication on our lives, and elements of communication cycle. Okay, so these was the topics that we studied in the last class. We completed till elements of communication cycle. Today we will learn more briefly about the elements of communication cycle. What are the different elements of the communication cycle? We will study about it briefly. Okay. So students, today along with elements of communication cycle, we will study one more topic, that is barriers to effective communication. What are the problems that may occur while communicating, or what are the problems that usually occur while we communicate with each other. So there will be two topics today that we will study. The first one will be elements of communication cycle, and the second one will be barriers to effective communication. What are the different barriers? Barrier means something which may lead to miscommunication. Okay, that is barriers to effective communication. All right. So students, let us begin with elements of communication cycle. Now what were the elements? I already told you in the last class that communication is a two-way process where there is one sender and there is a receiver. Okay, the sender sends the message to the receiver through different mediums where the receiver receives the message, he encodes it, and then he also transfers or he gives the feedback or response to the sender that whether he has received the message or the message that has been sent to the receiver is appropriate or not. Okay, so what were the elements? The elements were message, sender, encoding, communication channel, receiver, decoding, and feedback. Alright, so these were the elements of the communication cycle. Okay, students, first of all there will be a sender, then comes the message. Okay, first there should be a person who will send the message. Alright, first there will be a sender, then message, then encoding of the message, that means the formation of the message, what type of message is sender willing to send to the receiver. Then communication channel, through which medium he is trying to send the message, whether it be a person or any other communication network or medium. Then the receiver, to whom the message is being sent. Then the receiver, what does he do? He decodes the message, that means he reads out the message or he opens the message that is being sent by the sender. Then he sends back the feedback. There is a feedback or response. Okay, until and unless the sender gets the response to the message that he has sent to the receiver, that communication will not be liable. That means it will not be appropriate, or that will not be a fruitful message to the receiver that has been sent. Okay, so student, now let us begin with sender. First, there is the first element of the communication is sender. Okay, now who is a sender? A sender is an individual or group. A sender may be an individual person or it can be a group of people who has an idea or information which he wants to communicate with other. Okay, sender can be an individual person or it may be a group of people who have a particular idea or information about a particular topic, okay, which he or they want to send to a group of other people. Alright. Then the sender selects the channel based on factors like nature of the message, the kind of the audience, that is receiver, and the situation. The sender becomes the source of the message. Now it depends on the sender what kind of message is he sending. That is the nature of message. Whether it is related to the profession or whether it is a personal message sending to some family members or friends, professional, whether he is sharing that message among the group of team in his workstation or to his colleague. Alright, then it is based on the factor like nature of the message, what type of message is he sending and what kind of audience it is. The receiver, it may be a group of people, it may be your family, it may be your friends, it may be your colleagues, anything. Alright, and the situation, and based on the situation, in what situation, which message you are sending to the people. Okay, then the sender becomes the source of the message, and the sender is the one who sends the message. He is the source of the message. Okay, the sender is considered to be the source of the message. Alright, now the second element, that is message. Now what is message? It is the encoded idea sent by the sender. Encoded means the message which is not opened, which is just created to send to the receiver. Okay, once the message is sent to the receiver, then only the receiver decodes it. That means he reads the message out. But when we are sending a message to someone, we encode it. We keep it private or we keep it close. Okay, it is the encoded idea sent by the sender. The message could be verbal, written or spoken. That means verbal means you can send the message in writing also or by speaking also. Okay, or non-verbal. Non-verbal means it is the gesture of the body, like movements of the body or the gestures. That means the gesture means the position of the body which you give somebody a signal or a sign to communicate. Okay, then facial expression. There is also some facial expression through which you can transmit your message to another person. Okay, and there is also eye contact, tone of voice, etc. Okay, I gave you an example in the last class, right, where the father wanted to go to his son's place, where he mistaken in writing that he wrote reach tomorrow instead of writing reaching tomorrow. In that example, the message in the example is what the father wanted to convey. The father wanted to convey the message to his son, that is reach tomorrow instead of writing reaching tomorrow, where there occurred a misunderstanding and confusion between the two people. Okay, so message is something which you encode to send someone, which you create create to send someone. All right, then it can be verbal. Verbal means whether you can send it while writing also, by writing also, or by speaking up also. And non-verbal means through some expressions, through some gestures, with your body movement or the tone of your voice. Alright, through the facial expression. Sometimes when we want to give a message to someone, by looking at the people also we can transmit the message which we are trying to say. Yes or no? Suppose there is a guest in your house and you want your daughter or son not to come out of the room. At that time, how do you send the message to your son or daughter? By your facial expression, so that you don't want the guest to notice you. Yes or no? So that kind of message which is being sent, that is considered to be as non-verbal communication. Non-verbal communication where there is no written or spoken message. It is only transferred from one person to another through some facial expression or some gestures of the body movement, or some tone of the voice. Okay, so this is about sender and message. Now let us move to the next element. Now students, comes the encoding. What is the encoding part? Encoding means translation of an idea into a message by the source is called encoding. How do you send a message? How do you translate your words, or how do you translate your message? That is encoding. It becomes the source of the message. The message may be encoded in any combination of mutual understood word, sign or symbol. Anything it can be. It can be of words. The message can be encoded in words. That means you can write the message, or you can transfer it by any kind of sign you want to, or any symbols you can give. Alright, any kind of expression or any kind of writing or any kind of symbols you can encode a message with or into, okay. Then the symbols or signs used must be very clear to both the sender and the receiver. One most important point, the message that you are sending to someone, it should be very clear. That means anything which you are writing or you are trying to send to other people, it must be very clear and understandable, so that the receiver, when he receives the message, he understands what are you trying to convey him, or what are you trying to message him, okay. Then while encoding a message, one needs to consider what content to include, how the receiver will interpret it, and how it may affect one's relationship. And the message that you are sending, it should consider what content to include. What are you including in the message? What type of message you are trying to send to the sender? It must be very much clear. The content should include what type of message you are sending to the receiver. Then how the receiver will interpret it after reading the message, how the receiver will react to it, react according to your message. Suppose if I am sending you some message, I am trying to tell you something, or I am trying to insist you something, it should be that clear that the receiver should interpret in the same manner. The message that you are trying to send to the receiver should also interpret it in the same way. He should not take it in another way. He should not misunderstand the message that you are sending him. Alright. Then, and how it may affect one's relationship. If there is a misunderstanding in communication through message, it may also harm one's relationship. So you must be very careful while encoding the message. What are you trying to send to the receiver should be sent exactly, or received by the receiver exactly, that you are trying to convey him the message. Okay, and it should also be that much understandable by the receiver that it do not harm the relationship between both people. The communication must not mislead there. It should not be ineffective. The communication should be effective. Okay. Thus, encoding is guided by the nature and the purpose of the communication, as well as the relationship between the sender and the receiver. It should be guided by the nature. That means what type of message you are sending, and the purpose of the communication, as well as the relationship between the sender and the receiver. Just now I told you, the message should be in such a way that the message that you are sending should be exactly transferred to the receiver. What are you trying to convey him? It should not mislead. Alright. In the example that I gave you, that father wanted to go to meet his son's place, where he wrote reach tomorrow instead of writing reaching tomorrow. So there was a miscommunication and misunderstanding, which lead to the confusion, where the father, when he went to the son's place, the son has already left his place to come and meet his father. There was a only difference between the three words, that is ing. Instead of reaching, he only wrote reach, which lead to the misunderstanding and miscommunication. Alright. So this is how you encode the message. It should be very clear and perfect. Whatever you are trying to convey your message to other people, it should be received or it should be sent exactly what are you trying to interpret with the other people. Alright? Now students, comes the communication channel. Now what is communication channel? There is a sender, there is message. The message has been encoded, that means it has been written. Now how will you send that message? That becomes the communication channel. How to send the message, that becomes the communication channel. See, this is the means through which the message travels from one source to the receiver. How the message will be sent from you to the other people or the source where you want to send the message. Okay, so channels could be either oral or written. The channel could be either orally you can send the message, or by writing the message. But there is also a medium of exchanging the message between two people. See, with the advancement of the technology, nowadays the technology is advanced, so visual channels are now common. Visual channels mean something which we can see. Visual channels are those technology which we can see and read. Okay. The standard channels include, now what are the standard channels that include? That is video conferencing, through which we can see the video and we can communicate with each other. Video chat. Yes or no? Nowadays video chat, messaging over the mobile phones, over the computers are very much common nowadays. Yes or no? It has become the main medium of the communication. Main medium means the most commonly used medium of communication. Then telephone. Telephone is a verbal way of communication where we can speak up orally, etc. Written forms include text messages, then memos, letters, reports, emails, fax, etc. This becomes the written medium through which we can exchange our message from one person to another. Alright, so this is the communication channel, which is the medium through which we can send our message from one people to another for communication. Alright. Students, after the medium of channel, there is receiver who receives the message. Now, the person or group that receives the message is known as receiver. Now, who is receiver? Receiver is the person or the group of people to whom we are sending the message. Who receives the message is known as receiver. Okay? The receiver is the one who decodes or interprets the message. Decoding. Now, what does encoding means? To create the message, the formation of the message. Now, decoding means to open or to read out the message. That is decoding. Okay? And how he interprets the message that you have sent to the receiver. After receiving, how do he react according to the message? Whether he is reacting according to the message, or he is beyond, or he is reacting opposite to the message. It depends on the receiver on interpreting after reading or after receiving the message. If he is interpreting the same way that you have sent, then it will be a fruitful or a fulfilled communication. But if he does not act or interpret accordingly to your message, that will not be fruitful, or that message will be miscommunicated. There will be a miscommunication. It is important to note that the meaning of the communication is what is interpreted and what was intended. Just now I told you, intention. There is always an intention while sending a message. Okay, a person sends a message only if he has some intention. If he has some intention to show to other people, then only he sends the message in that way. And the receiver should also interpret, and he should also understand the intention that you are trying to convey him. Okay, my intention is, I am teaching you, my intention is that my students should understand whatever I am trying to convey them. Whatever I am trying to teach you, my intention is that you must understand whatever I am trying to speak up in front of you. But if you don't understand what I am trying to communicate with you, that will not be a fruitful communication. Okay, there where I will lack in transferring you my speech or my message. Okay, so the receiver should interpret your intention as you have sent or created the message to the receiver to be sent. Okay, any error on the part of the receiver may make the communication ineffective. If there is some error or if there is some mistake in the message that you have sent to the receiver, it may lead to the ineffective communication. Alright, I hope you understood this. If there is some mistake or error in the message that is received by the receiver, there will be an ineffective communication. That means that communication will not be totally fulfilled, or that will not be a fruitful communication. There will be a confusion or misunderstanding created. Alright? And now students, after the message is received by the receiver, that message the receiver will decode it. That means he will read it, or he will open the message to read what it is written there. Yes or no? It is the process of deriving meaning from the received message. That means that receiver will derive the meaning of the message. That means what is the meaning of the message, and how will you derive the meaning of the message after reading the message? Yes or no? Only keeping the message or receiving the message is not sufficient. You must read it and you must derive the meaning of it. You have to understand the meaning of the message. The message should be worded carefully so that the receiver easily understands it. If the message is encoded while keeping the receiver in mind, it will be easier to decode it. If you encode a message, or if you create a message in such a way that you keep the receiver, that means you keep the receiver in mind, that means you are keeping in mind whether the receiver will understand the message that you are writing or not. Okay, the message that you are writing, while writing the message, you keep the receiver in your mind, that whatever I am writing into the message will be understandable by the receiver or not. If you keep that thing in mind, then there will be no confusion in communication with other people. Okay, but if you write whatever you wish to, not keeping the receiver in mind or not thinking about the receiver whether he will understand or not, it may be with words, it may be with language, it may be with anything. Okay, suppose I am speaking English or I am speaking Hindi, but you are sending me a message in some other language. I will not be able to understand it. Yes or no? So you have to keep the receiver in mind while creating or encoding a message, so that when the receiver will decode the message or will read the message, he must understand it. Okay, for example, the words and the tone you choose to express your thought to a friend will be different from what you choose for your parents and teachers. Yes or no? The way we speak with our friends, or the way we convey our speech or communication with our friends, that is totally different that we do with our parents and teachers. The way of communication is different with our parents and teacher than that of our friends. Yes or no? So this is because you know that they will interpret or receive the message differently. The message that you send to your friend, you know how will he react to it after reading. So you will send him in the message in that way, which your friend will understand. But the same thing if you send to your parents or teachers, will they take it in the same way? No, they will misinterpret it. Yes or no? So there is a difference between the type of communication that you do with different people. There is a different type of communication that we do with different types of people. All right? This comes the feedback. Okay? After the sender sends the message, creating the message to the receiver, and after the receiver receives the message and decodes it, he must send the feedback to the sender again. That is the communication cycle. The sender encodes a message to the receiver, and the receiver receives the message, decoding it, that means reading it. After that, he must send the feedback to the sender again. Because without feedback or without response, how will you come to know that the receiver has received the message and he has interpreted or read the message? Without feedback. Yes or no? Whatever I am teaching you, until and unless I ask you back whether you have understood or not, I will not be able to understand whether my message or my teaching is sent to you correctly or not. Yes or no? So feedback is very important. The cycle of communication is complete when the sender receives the feedback from the receiver. The communication cycle is only completed when the receiver, after receiving the message, sends the feedback to the sender again, that yes, whatever you have sent to me, I have received in the proper manner, in the way which you tried to convey me the message. Okay? Without feedback, the sender cannot confirm if the receiver has interpreted the message correctly. Just as I told you, without feedback, the sender will not be able to understand whether the message that he has sent to the receiver is sent to him correctly or not. Okay? Feedback is also given and received to improve behavior and performances. That means, why do we need feedback? If there is some mistake or if there is some miscommunication, we need feedback so we can improve our mistakes, or whether it is related to the behavior or our writing or our performances, anything it can be, so that we can correct our mistakes. A constructive feedback informs and motivates people to improve themselves. And if there is a constructive feedback, that means the feedback is good or positive, it helps the sender to improve themselves. That means it encourages the sender to improve the way of sending the message. Okay, that is the communication cycle. Okay. So now students, after the elements of communication, now comes the barrier of effective communication. Barrier means what are the problems that occur while communicating. Alright, a barrier of effective communication is any factor, individual, situational or environmental, that prevents the receiver from receiving and understanding the message accurately. Now what is barrier? Barrier of effective communication is a factor, whether it can be of an individual or it can be related to the situation or some environmental problem, some technical problem that prevents the receiver from receiving the message and understanding it properly. Alright, then these barriers can lead to misunderstanding and confusion between a sender and a receiver, which create a misconfusion between the sender and the receiver. If there is a barrier in communication, it creates the confusion between the sender and the receiver. Alright, some of the significant barriers are guided by the nature and the purpose of communication, as well as the relation between the sender between the sender and the receiver. Alright, there is some miscommunication that occurs between the sender and the between the sender and the receiver. What kind of miscommunication? That means if there is a barrier of, like you can say, if there is a barrier of signal, or if there is a barrier of some situation or some individual, then it creates a confusion between the sender and the receiver, which can exploit the relationship between the two people who are communicating with each other. Okay? So now students, what is the environmental barrier that occurs miscommunication? Environmental barrier means there are the physical condition. These are the physical condition that affect the communication process. Some physical condition may also affect some communication process. For example, defective instruments. If the medium of communication is an instrument and if it is defective, then it may lead to miscommunication. Poor lighting. Okay, the lighting is poor, then also it may create some miscommunication. Uncomfortable sitting arrangement. Okay, and unhygienic room condition distract the listeners. If you are the one who is trying to convey the message to a listener, if there are some environmental barriers like the defective instrument, suppose you can use the microphone. If you are using to convey your message to a group of audience, if there is a defective instrument, that is, if you are using a microphone and the microphone is defective, you will not be able to convey your voice or your message to the people because they will not be able to hear it properly. Okay, poor lighting. If you are standing in front of a poor light and there is a group of audience sitting together, and if they are not being able to see you or hear you properly, that will be a miscommunication. Uncomfortable sitting arrangement. If the audience or the listener is not comfortable to listen you, then there will be a miscommunication. And if the room is also unhygienic in condition, then it may distract the listener from receiving your message. Alright, so that is some environmental barrier. Then situational barrier. Now what is situational barrier? The factors like distance, noise and distraction cause unnecessary disruption in the communication process. Situational barrier means if you are trying to speak up something and if there is a lot of noise, the listener will not be able to communicate with you, or he will not be able to take the message that you are trying to convey him or you are trying to send him. Okay, then there is a barrier of distance also. If the distance between the two people is more, then that will lead to a miscommunication. And if the surrounding is noisy and you are trying to convey your message to a group of audience, then also your message will not be sent properly to the audience, or the audience may not receive your message properly. And distraction cause unnecessary disruption. Okay, there are some distraction who may disturb you while receiving the message. That will also mislead to the communication. Okay, for example, see, loud music and noise from generators or other machinery. If you are working in your office or somewhere and you are sitting in a meeting and you are getting some unreasonable noise or unnecessary noise, then it will lead to the miscommunication, as the client or the group of people who are sitting along with you will not be able to listen you, and the message that you are trying to convey him, he will not get it properly, he will not receive it properly. Okay, so these are some environmental barriers and situational barriers. All right. And now students comes the individual barrier. Individual means which is related to a particular person or a particular mode of communication. Okay. some of the individual barriers are attitudinal. The first one is attitudinal barrier. Now what is this attitudinal barrier? It is related to the factor like age, gender, lack of interest, discomfort with the topic, culture, and socio-economic or professional status define how a listener perceives and interprets the message. It means that what age, what gender, lack of interest, whether you are interested or not in receiving the message, discomfort with the topic, whether you are comfortable with the topic, okay, then culture, it relates the culture also, and socio-economic or professional status. This defines how a listener perceives, how a listener takes that message which you are trying to send, to communicate, and interprets the message, and how the message which is being sent to the receiver, how do he react accordingly the message that is being sent to him or her. Okay, suppose I give you an example of an age and gender. Okay, if you are trying to send a message to a people who is much more elder to your age, then you have to frame that word or that speech in such a way that should be understandable by the elder one. And if some elder people is trying to convey you a message who is younger at age, he must also convey that message in such a way that will be understandable by the person to whom he is sending, and it should be in such a proper and appropriate manner that when he sends the message, the person will take it and react it accordingly to the message that is being sent to him. It should not create misunderstanding, or it should not have that topic which is not of your interest. The message should contain a topic which should have your interest in receiving. Okay, and it should also, you must also keep in mind that the message that you are sending to the listener or the receiver, he must perceive in a way which is understandable to him, and he must react accordingly to the message. Then only that it will be a proper communication and effective communication. Okay, then the other factor which is the barrier of communication is the linguistic ability. Linguistic ability means it is related with the language. Okay, speech disorder or physical disability can distort the communication process. If there is speech disorder, that means if you are not being able to speak up properly, there will be a miscommunication. Or physical disability, or if you are physically disabled, then there will be a miscommunication. Additionally, the lack of proficiency in the language affects the interpretation of the message as well. That means, an example I have already given you. Suppose I know only one particular language and you are sending the message in some other language. I will not be able to interpret it in the way which you are sending me. Okay? You must send me a message that in that language which is understandable by me. Okay? You must send me a message which is understandable by me in a particular language, not the language which I do not understand. So, there is where the linguistic barrier comes. If you are not clear with your speech, you will not be able to convey the message which you are trying to give to the receiver, which you are trying to send to the receiver. Alright, so the attitudinal factor and the linguistic ability is very important while sending or communicating with each other. Alright. And now comes, students, the inattention. This inattention is also a factor of miscommunication. If a person is not interested in receiving your message, he will not understand what are you trying to communicate with him. The other people should be interested to the topic that you are trying to speak up with him. He must be interested first of all to receive the message that you are trying to convey him. It is written there, see, if the person is preoccupied or distracted or just not interested in the conversation, he will likely be not attentive. It may result in an adverse effect on the outcome of the communication. A person must be interested to receive your message. If he is preoccupied, that means if he is occupied in some other work and you are trying to convey a message to him which he is inattentively listening to it, then he will lead to a miscommunication, because he will not understand what exactly you are trying to deliver him. What message you are trying to deliver him, he will not understand. For that, the person should be attentive, or he must be interested in receiving your message. Alright? Then emotional state. There is also a barrier, that is emotional state. Now, emotion of the sender at the time of encoding may result in the usage of wrong words or tone that may lead to the miscommunication. Okay? Emotional state means something which is related to the emotion of a person. You cannot send anything which is going against the emotion of the person. That may lead to the miscommunication and it may create conflicts between two people. So you must also keep the emotion of a person in mind while sending a message, while encoding a message, that means while creating a message. Alright? Likewise, the receiver may misinterpret the message due to his emotion. That means if you are not keeping the emotion in mind, that means the receiver which will receive your message, he might misinterpret it. He might take it in a wrong way or in other way, and that will create conflict between two people while communication. Okay? So this is all about the barriers of effective communication. There are three barriers, which are environmental barrier, then situational barrier, individual barrier. And in individual barrier, there are more topics such as attitudinal, linguistic ability, inattention, and emotional state. All these things you must keep in mind while sending and receiving a message. Alright, so students, this is all about the communication cycle. I hope you understood this. Now, what were the topics in this that we studied? First, we studied with the communication, which is a two-way process, which includes a sender and a receiver, where a sender sends a message, encoding it, that means forming it, and he sends through a medium of channel to the receiver. When the receiver receives the message, he decodes it and he sends the feedback to the receiver, to the sender. Then only the communication cycle is fulfilled. Okay? Then there were some features of effective communication, importance of communication skill, then impact of effective communication on our life, then elements of the communication cycle. The elements were sender, message, encoding, communication channel, receiver, decoding, and feedback. These are the elements of the communication. Then the barriers of effective communication, as I told you. So this is all about this chapter. Okay, I hope you understood this chapter. In the next class, I will start with the next chapter. So students, thank you for watching the video. I will see you in the next class.